What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the controversial reveal of the 28th team in my 2019 NFL Power Rankings, a deep dive into the Baltimore Ravens. Also, pardon my nasally voice. I'm combating the last legs of a cold here, so bear with me on that. The show must go on. Anyway, this is the first team in this list that I feel I actually need to defend my ranking of before we dive in and break down the team, because this 28th ranking is much lower than consensus on the Ravens. In fact, right now NFL Network has this team 13th in their power rankings, but just like we broke down last year when we ranked the consensus top 5 Jacksonville Jaguars 23rd, who NFL had ranked 4th at the time, or the year before when they had the Giants ranked 1st and we had them like 12th or 13th. You know, on this channel, we don't just copy and paste the standings from last year, look at the hype teams, and apply them to next year's power rankings. Nope, on this channel, we break down every factor of each team and apply it to a new league framework in the next year, as opposed to just assuming last year's win totals are going to magically repeat themselves. And as far as this Ravens team goes, they answer pretty much every red flag we have for regression from year to year. For one, they had a remarkably healthy season last year, which is probably my biggest indicator for regression for most teams. After the season ends, the entire league gets healthy. But if you were already perfectly healthy at the end of the year, well, other teams are going to catch up and you don't have that kind of room to grow in that regard. So the Ravens are already coming from behind in that regard. But then, they also relied on a top 3 defense last year, which is historically proven to have a high variance from season to season. And then you add on the fact that they actually lost a lot of critical pieces on that defense. C.J. Mosley, Terrell Suggs, Zadarius Smith. Even Brent Urban was a D lineman that had big impact last year. So you've got reasons for regression there. And then, most importantly, they had a lot of success despite poor quarterback play, which has proven year after year to be the number one indicator for regression. So, Ravens fans, before you freak out, and I know you're going to anyway, I know you're probably going to want to dislike that video. If you have to, then do it. I encourage you not to. But I do also encourage you to go back and look at what I said about the Jaguars last year in last year's deep dives. And before you lay into me in the comments, ask yourself if you're doing and saying the same things that Jags fans did last year. You may also notice, going back to last year, that I actually like the Ravens. I ranked them a lot higher than consensus last season, so I don't have some kind of vendetta against this team. I just don't really believe they have a high probability of being very good this year. So now that ranking's out of the way, let's move forward, dive into this team, because it's really not all bad, and there is some reason for hope here that I'm excited to talk about. And in fact, like we started to say as early as our 30th team this year, the NFL is very deep right now, deeper than I can ever remember. If Baltimore, despite a 28th ranking, found a way to surprise and snuck into the playoffs, it wouldn't be the biggest shock in the world. So before we get started, I do want to issue a quick reminder to please hit that like button. It's the easiest way to support the channel. Also, share this video. And then also, if you're shopping for tickets, looking for the best prices, the best seats, go to SeatGeek and then use promo code ThatFranchiseGuy, where you'll save $20 on your first purchase. So if you're new to this series, first of all, welcome. But what we do is we do a bit of an intro, and then we go through the roster. We stack up each position group, how they rank against the rest of the league for the team we're reviewing. And while we're doing that, we're looking at my own personal Madden roster. So while you are looking at a video game, it is a nice graphic. These are my ratings, so it's a good way to just easily show how I perceive each player. And then after that, we take a look at the schedule. We break down game by game. We talk about this team's Vegas odds, their over-under, and really just kind of wrap up what my overall expectations are for the team. If you've been around, we do have some slight changes here to the power ratings calculator. This is something I noticed last year. So we've always had this coach and culture grade, but the way we calculated it, it was leading to some worse defenses getting ranked higher in defense than they frankly probably should. Teams like the Kansas City Chiefs come to mind. They have an excellent coach and culture with Andy Reid, but they've really been a bad defense over the last few years. So we've now split this up into offensive and defensive coaching culture. It's more or less the same. And in fact, once I redid all these calculations, the power rankings came out about the same. So there are no changes in 29 through 32. There might be a couple slides in teams to come, but the last 4 that we've already done actually stayed the same. And I think we're going to get a little more accuracy in terms of the ratings there. So anyway, let's start talking about the Baltimore Ravens. And we can kind of skip the intro because any sort of intro and how this team can improve their 28th ranking is going to hinge on Lamar Jackson. So the quarterback ranking here for me is dead last in the NFL, 32nd. And when Lamar Jackson got drafted, I liked the pick for the Ravens. They needed a way to get out of Joe Flacco. That was not going anywhere. And they actually made this work for a little bit. And I was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out on Lamar Jackson before we saw him on an NFL field. We knew coming out of college that he had accuracy issues. There was no doubt about that. My question was, with some NFL coaching in a more traditional NFL scheme, can they make him a better thrower of the football? And that answer came to us very quickly. The answer was no. No quarterback in the NFL missed more throws. I believe it was 30% of throws to open wide receivers. And now you've got reports that he's trying to rework his mechanics, but the ball's coming out high. He's having a hard time picking up the offense. And they've basically committed to this run-oriented, triple option, RPO, play action offense that is going to really, limit the ceiling of this offense. And that explains a lot of this 28th ranking. Now, I'm cheering for Lamar Jackson. I hope he can figure out how to throw an accurate football. But the truth is, that's something that history will tell us. It just doesn't really improve. You are either accurate or you're not. You can make slight improvements, but as I watched Lamar Jackson getting pretty much booed off the field, even though he did respond a little bit, in the playoffs with 6 passing yards with 14 minutes to go in a playoff game at home, it really makes you wonder how this team's going to turn it around offensively. And you saw a lot of signs that say, yeah, this team's not going to be able to respond from this, and they're going to have to look for another quarterback at some point. That's really the takeaway you had from watching this team in the playoffs. So obviously you like Lamar Jackson's mobility, and you hope that he can figure out how to throw an accurate football, because he does have pretty good pocket awareness. He can get out of trouble pretty easily. He might be a little eager to run, but he has something of a processor in there. He just can't throw an accurate football. So that's really where the problems start here for the Ravens for me. It's just the offense is going to be remarkably inconsistent. So behind him, you've got Robert Griffin and Trace McSorley. So they're kind of doubling down on this mobile quarterback thing. If anything happened to Lamar Jackson, which, to be honest, is, dare I say, likely with the way that they use him as a runner. You do have RG3. He's not what he used to be, but he can play that role. And if Lamar Jackson keeps, playing like he did in the playoffs last year, RG3 might be a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson, and do they bench Lamar Jackson for a more accurate thrower? And then they have Trace McSorley as well, who they're going to try and do, maybe some things like what the Saints did with Taysom Hill, something they witnessed firsthand as the Saints beat them last season. So overall, this has got to be the least accurate throwing quarterback room in the NFL. There's some upside there with Lamar Jackson. It's a total wait and see approach there, though, almost like guilty until proven innocent right now with Lamar Jackson, who I just don't believe can throw an accurate football. And a lot of Lamar Jackson truthers are going to show you a clip here or a clip there of him throwing nice balls. Yeah, he can deliver nice strikes, but it's not about 1 or 2 nice throws in a game. It's about being consistent for 20, 25, 30, 35 throws in a game that's going to make you anywhere close to an average quarterback. So we're going to move on here, but Lamar Jackson, to me, has a lot of room to grow. So then we've got the running backs here, 21st in the league for me. They signed Mark Ingram, that I think was a really good signing. This team last year, Gus Edwards, Kenneth Dixon, Ty Montgomery, they were rotating these guys and not really getting a consistent number 1 guy in there. Mark Ingram, a really good player. You do have questions on if he can stay healthy, but he can be a 3-down back for this team. Now, I don't think they'll use him like that because you got Gus Edwards, who was a really good undrafted rookie last year. They clearly don't view him as a full-time starter for them, kind of like they did with Alex Collins, just kind of a low-level investment, but a guy that can run between the tackles. You got Kenneth Dixon, who I think still has a super high upside. He fumbled a couple times late last year that I think led to this team drafting Justice Hill to be more of that third down back. Justice Hill, a really good player. I think he's going to get a lot of playing time here. Someone's going to be on the field quite a bit in third downs, and is going to be a nice weapon for Lamar to kind of check it down to and try to turn 3rd and 7s into first downs. No one to really speak of after those 4. You do have some camp bodies. But I like the upgrade in Mark Ingram. You really have 4 guys that you can hand the rock off to here and feel okay about it, assuming Kenneth Dixon can hold on to the ball. And this is going to be a run-heavy offense. You're going to want to rotate these guys around. You're going to have some injuries between these 4 guys. So it's nice to have some flexibility there and some talent in this room, though you don't really have any elite pieces there. And then we've got the wide receivers here, where they're actually going to rank 32nd here. So they draft Marquise Brown in the first round. And I had been saying in the entire pre-draft process, it is a waste to draft a wide receiver for Lamar Jackson in the first round because he's inaccurate and he's not going to really develop a guy like Marquise Brown or utilize his skill set as a deep receiver. Now, he is going to have some really explosive catch and run, screen style stuff, and he might connect with Lamar on some deep balls, but I don't think you're going to get the consistency there to return value for taking this player in the first round. And as far as this being an upgrade, yeah, he's a better player than John Brown, but he's effectively the same guy, though he's a little bit faster. But a very similar player. He's just going to plug into that same role in this offense. It's not like John Brown was amazing with Lamar Jackson. He did have his moments. And then you also are losing Michael Crabtree, so to replace that sort of bigger body, jump ball, red zone threat, you're going to have Miles Boykin here, a 3rd-round pick. Does Chris Moore emerge? Jordan Lastly, a 5th-round pick last year. Jaleel Scott, a 4th-round pick last year that I really did not like. I just don't think he can really play. A little too stiff for my liking. They signed Michael Floyd. Can he reemerge? Like, you've got all, 5 bodies there are going to compete. Even Jalen Smith, an undrafted free agent this year, all kind of bigger bodied guys who are going to compete for that number 2 outside threat. And I couldn't really tell you who's going to win it. My guess is Miles Boykin. And then you got Willie Snead there in the slot. Seth Roberts might compete for a spot on this team. He's showed some signs there in Oakland. Seth Roberts, really athletic guy, but he's got drop issues. Question his kind of ability to play. So this wide receiver room is not good. Like I said, it ranks last. I like Marquise Brown as a wide receiver. I just don't see him really blowing up here in Baltimore. And that mostly comes back to Lamar Jackson, but it also just has to do with the type of offense that this team's going to want to run. They're going to want to run the ball on 1st and 2nd down, probably more than any team in the league, and you just don't have a accurate downfield thrower. Now, you do have a really nice tight end room. This is arguably the best tight end room in the NFL if you want to look like 3 deep, because Mark Andrews, fantastic rookie season, way faster than you would expect, like deceiving speed. In my opinion, a much better player than Hayden Hurst, who they spent a 1st-round pick on last year. Hurst can certainly play. He's going to be the 3rd tight end here because you got Nick Boyle here, who you just gave a big contract extension to. Arguably the best blocking tight end in the NFL with Rob Gronkowski retiring. Really big guy. He can do some things as a receiver. He's not really creating a lot of separation, but he can kind of sneak out on play action, be a check down target that can run guys over. I even saw him hurdle a guy last year. So I love what they're going to have, in this rushing play-action offense. Now, I don't love that being your biggest trick. I like it when you're the Saints and that's your 3rd or 4th trick, or the Chiefs where a heavy package can confuse some teams. But when that's your entire offense, I'm just not a fan of that approach. That said, this is going to be a headache for a lot of defensive coordinators. The smart ones are going to be able to figure it out. The talented defenses are going to be able to figure it out. If you're going against some of these worst defenses, you might kind of have your way with them. Because that is, between Lamar Jackson and Marquise Brown, a lot of speed to kind of figure out. But again, as a whole, a pretty one-dimensional offense. And then you've got the offensive line here. By no means a bad group. I would say this falls a little bit between one of those offensive lines that we talked about with the Raiders. It's really 3 tiers. The lines that help you do what you want to do, the lines that just don't really get in your way and allow you to do what you want to do, and then the offensive lines that get in your way because they're so bad. This is a good offensive line. They're going to kind of help this team do some of this stuff in the run game. They got a lot of maulers here. You got some holes as well, though. I don't think it's really anything close to a top 10 group. They rank 17th for me. So you got a good tackle duo here. Ronnie Stanley at left tackle, Orlando Brown at right tackle. Brown, a rookie last year, a bit of a mauler type. Doesn't have the quickest feet. If this was more of a traditional 5-step, 7-step drop offense where they're looking to go vertical, you might have some more questions about Brown. But when you want to run the ball, you want to run guys over, you want to move the pocket with play action, he's a very good right tackle for that, and he graded out very well in this system last year. And then Ronnie Stanley at left tackle, he's a franchise tackle, he's a top 10 guy. So you like the tackle duo here. You still got Marshall Yanda, probably a couple years removed now from being the best offensive lineman in the NFL, but still a beast nonetheless. Hopefully he doesn't have a dramatic age drop-off. It seems like a lot of these older linemen, they can go from Pro Bowl caliber to cuttable real quick. Look at like a Ryan Schrader for the Atlanta Falcons last year, among other examples in the league. And then at center, you got Matt Skura. He's fine. They've done a good job of bringing in these lower-level undrafted centers and letting them kind of just get familiar with this system, developing him there. So he's going to be a starting caliber center. There's nothing really special about him. He's almost a carbon copy of what they had in Ryan Jensen a year ago. And then at left guard, you actually don't really know who's going to start here. I do like the pick of Ben Powers in the 4th round. He's a good guard out of Oklahoma. You got Alex Lewis. Bradley Bozeman played some guard for this team last year. Does James Hurst play some guard? Jermaine Illuminor, a 5th round pick in 2017. It's going to be a big competition at left guard, and that spot is definitely what's going to, be this team's kind of hole. If they had a stud starter at guard, I would say this line is closer to elite than bad. Right now, just kind of sits in the middle. Maybe Ben Powers can be that guy. I don't know if he has that upside, but he could certainly win that starting job and be at least a low-level starter at guard. So you could certainly do worse. This is an offensive line that's going to help them run the ball, execute these RPOs, the triple option. It's not a line that I would really trust to hold up for you to throw the ball deep, but it's not like you got a quarterback there that can do that anyway. So the offense as a whole comes in 30th for me. There's worse offenses in the league despite the way we're talking about this, but I do not have a lot of faith in this offense. As far as the coach and culture for this offense, it's a good culture here in Baltimore. Harbaugh knows how to, run a good program. Schematically, they've kind of got their system here. They're going to do like that 49ers Kaepernick read option offense. It's the most unique looking offense in the NFL probably, but it's also a style of offense that it's just not very ideal because it limits your upside. If you're rolling your quarterback to the right and they cover up your wide receivers, you've got nowhere to go. There's no pocket to manipulate, no field to utilize. It's all just kind of used up if you're trotting towards the sideline. And then just the nature of a lot of these RPOs and screens, like if a defense takes away that first read, there's just not, a lot of upside to create more offense beyond that, even if your quarterback was capable of it. So the offense, a major, major question mark for me. But then we will transition now to the defensive side of the ball where we can change our tone a little bit because this Baltimore team, over the last decade, I would say, under Harbaugh, is consistently one of the most badass defenses year after year. And yes, we've pointed to some departures on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm sure I already lost some Ravens fans by now. But if you stuck around, you'll at least be happy to hear me say that I appreciate this team's ability to lose a C.J. Mosley and get production from other players. And that's going to be a big theme with this defense, is that it's kind of a machine. And while you have some questions about who they lost and who's going to step up, you do feel pretty confident that this team is going to have a good defense. And as we saw, I ranked them 12th defensively despite these losses. So let's go through this positionally. You've got the run defense, to me, a top 10 unit. Losing CJ Mosley is going to hurt. This is mostly about the interior defensive line, though. And you've got two guys north of 340 pounds that move better than anyone that heavy should be able to do. Michael Pierce and Brandon Williams set the tone up front. Matthew Judon on the edge is a fantastic run defender. And then you've just got a highly physical secondary. It's rare that a secondary is going to play much of a factor into a run defense, but when you've got guys like Marlon Humphrey and Tony Jefferson in the secondary, who are as close to heat-seeking missiles as you're going to find from defensive backs, like, this team's just going to be able to play the run, plain and simple, even after losing C.J. Mosley, who's one of the best run-defending linebackers in the NFL. And you just got to appreciate this defensive line, because despite losing Brent Urban, you just have confidence that this team is going to be able to replace that production. Like, Brent Urban wasn't some big investment to begin with, so you got Chris Wormley here, you got Willie Henry, two Michigan products. I expect one of, if not both of those guys to play very good this year in base defense looks. You've got Zach Sealer, who they took in the 7th round last year. They do bring back Pernell McPhee to kind of be that Zadarius Smith replacement, so can he kind of rejuvenize his career coming back here to Baltimore? And he's going to play a combination of defensive end, D-line, outside linebacker, all that stuff. I love the Gerald Willis pickup as an undrafted free agent. Dalen Mack is almost a carbon copy of Brandon Williams and Michael Pierce, who are stud nose tackles. So this defensive line is going to be a very good unit, a dominant unit. Now, they don't really have that Geno Atkins, Fletcher Cox, dare you say Aaron Donald. They don't really have that type of a nightmare on this D-line, but the depth is really remarkable. I expect a lot of those depth pieces we talked about to get rejuvenized in this team that just does better than anyone else, arguably, at getting production and good run defense from this defensive line. And then we will talk about the middle linebackers on this team in a minute, but someone is going to have to step up, whether it's Kenny Young, Chris Board, Patrick Owasu, but we'll get to them in just a second. So between that linebacker position and then this edge rush position that we'll talk about here, and then of course the quarterback and just offense as a whole, those are the big question marks dragging this team down. And this edge rush has some pieces here. And a spoiler alert for those that are watching this video, I will be at some point before the season starts doing a breakout candidates for 2019. And both Matthew Judon and Tim Williams on the edge here, along with Tyus Bowser, are going to be mentioned in that video because you've got guys departing here and you've got this culture who does develop these guys. So really a lot of snaps are opening up here with Zadarius Smith and Terrell Suggs leaving. So Matt Judon is going to be the number one here, and he's had inconsistencies. He's never really proven to be a number one guy, but he's got the opportunity now to emerge as that guy. And I think there's a very good chance that he does have a breakout season and is regarded in the same light that, like we saw from Pernell McPhee about 5 or 6 years ago, who got absolutely paid by the Bears. Like we just saw from Zadarius Smith. He fits the exact same mold, a lower level investment guy, a bigger bodied edge rusher who just turns it on in like year 4 or 5. And ironically, he's a 5th round pick in 2016, so that means his contract's going to be up here. I don't think they've extended him yet. So yet again, another one of these guys nearing a contract year who could just have an explosive 70-plus pressure season. And despite this 23rd ranking, I'm actually projecting that and playing that into account here. So even if his Madden rating here looks a little lower, I actually think he's going to be a low-end number one edge rusher this year. My questions after Matt Judon actually emerge after that, because the interior defensive line, while we like those guys, none of them are true pass rushing types. You know, you can get some decent push from Brandon Williams, from Michael Pierce, but as, 240-pound guys, it's a little bit inconsistent. You want that edge rush, right? Unless you're getting that interior pressure from like a Geno Atkins or Fletcher Cox. You don't really get that here. But the guys you're looking at are Tim Williams, who hasn't really just gotten the overall playing time to prove it, but he actually looked pretty good last year, and I would expect him to potentially break out here. Tyus Bowser, a super athletic 2nd-round pick. Can he reach his potential? You do have Jalen Ferguson, a 3rd-round pick. this year, I see him as a young Matt Judon who could take a couple years to kind of put on weight. He doesn't have the explosiveness to be a speed rusher, a highly productive, college edge rusher who played at a lower level. I think his best path to success is going to be the fourth guy here and just put on weight and learn from these more power rushing types and to become that kind of next Ravens mold edge rusher. So the big questions on this edge are going to be Tyus Bowser and Tim Williams. Can one of them take a step up and elevate their game? And if they do, this 23rd edge rush ranking is going to look silly. And this defensive ranking of 12th is also going to look silly because a big reason this team had so much success last year is they were coming from every angle, right? You had Terrell Suggs, who actually had a kind of a down year. I think the first name you have to mention is Zadarius Smith, who is gone. But then you had Matt Judon. Tim Williams actually played pretty well. You had Terrell Suggs. You had like four guys there rotating in and out, moving around, and just pushing that pocket. This pass rush was, while, kind of unique in that it was all about the power rush and just pushing that pocket. They don't really have a speed rusher on this roster. It was highly effective and one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. So can you get Tim Williams and Tyus Bowser to take those steps up? There's a chance they can. They have that upside, but we can't just totally project that. So that explains this 23rd pass rush ranking. And you also got to throw Parnell McPhee's name in the hat there. I'm not expecting much from Shane Ray. Maybe he can be a speed rush element here. I doubt it. And Parnell McPhee hasn't really been relevant for about a year, so it's, kind of a question mark if he can do anything. So let's transition to the linebackers here. And on paper, it's probably the worst group of linebackers in the NFL. Now, you do have to recognize this team's ability to develop that position, but I'm not comfortable taking that big of a leap of faith. I've got this team tied for last in terms of inside linebacker, and next to Lamar Jackson, this is my biggest question, is you're losing CJ Mosley, who was a fantastic threat in the middle of this defense. Just a rare size speed linebacker with just good playmaking instincts. And you're going to be missing that. They did nothing to fill that void. You do have Patrick Owasu here who played pretty well last year, but he was kind of used as more of like a blitzer, that second linebacker, a smaller guy. Like, he's not a number one linebacker. Maybe he proves me wrong, but like, who's stepping up next to him? Chris Board? Kenny Young, could he be a breakout candidate this year? A fourth-round pick, a really athletic guy. He is a guy that they clearly have a lot of confidence in, but you're projecting a lot there, and they really just don't have a lot of depth here. EJ Ajaya, Elvin Jones, Silas Stewart, do one of those guys emerge? Maybe. Matthew Thomas they picked up, athletic guy out of Florida State. You're taking a really big leap of faith if you're saying this linebacker room is going to be an asset to this defense. So it'll be interesting to see what Baltimore can whip up here with this depth chart. But you got some major questions both in terms of defending the run from these linebackers and that coverage unit in the middle of the field, because this secondary is sick, just like I am right now. But, if you can't get good coverage from those linebackers, it's going to be a hole on that defense. So let's transition now to that secondary, ranking third for me. And to be completely honest, if Marlon Humphrey continues to grow, he's looking like someone that could finish the year as a top 5 corner based on how he played at the end of last year. And if Earl Thomas can be his old self, there's really no reason this wouldn't be the best secondary in the NFL. But you got a little bit of projection there. So like we said, Marlon Humphrey, a true number one corner, really dominated last year. I think did benefit from that elite pass rush that they had last year. So for his sake, you hope that the guys we talked about, Tim Williams, Tyus Bowser, can elevate their game and get something close to the pass rush they had last year to help out Marlon Humphrey. But he's a total stud. And then Brandon Carr still has it, man. He was one of the highest rated nickel corners last year. He can play outside as well. Really nice piece there. Now, he is aging along with Jimmy Smith here. You don't really expect them to be as good as they were last year. Actually, Jimmy Smith was frankly pretty bad last year. He missed a bunch of time because of suspension, right? I don't think it was injury. But Jimmy Smith is almost the odd man out at this point. The depth here is unlike anything in the league. You've got Tavon Young. He's one of the better young nickel corners in the league. Maurice Kennedy, a guy that just hasn't been on the field because of the depth here, but he's a young player that this team has a lot of faith in. Anthony Averett, a 4th-round pick out of Alabama last year who played well when he got on the field. Justin Bethel's here for some reason. I don't see him making the team, but he's been a good corner throughout his career. A good 4th option if that's what they use him as. And then Amon Marshall gets drafted in the 4th round here. Now, I think that they're going to convert him to safety. I don't know if that's been confirmed here. He's got some stiffness issues, but I see him as a long-term replacement at safety, whether it be as a rangy center fielder or more of a box safety like Tony Jefferson's replacement. He's really a flexible athlete that could be either of those. I just think they have so many corners here that there's really no reason to keep him at corner. But then you do have a great safety duo, Earl Thomas and Tony Jefferson. I think Earl Thomas is one of the 5 best defensive players of my lifetime. Now, coming off another broken leg, what kind of range does he have? You do have a question mark next to that, but it's Earl Thomas, so come on, he's going to be a stud. And it's an upgrade to this secondary over Eric Weddle. And then Tony Jefferson's just a dominant run-defending box safety. You got some questions about his range, overall coverage, but he's more or less a linebacker. And between him and Anthony Levine, there is going to be some makeup for what you're missing in C.J. Mosley as that kind of nickel linebacker role, almost certainly. And then you also have Chuck Clark and Deshaun Elliott, a pair of 6th-round picks over the last couple years that they're hoping can continue to grow and outperform that 6th-round status like this team does so well. So despite us ripping into this offense, I do think I have an optimistic approach on this defense. A lot of people are going to say they lost too many bodies for this to be a top 10 defense. Now, I do rank them 12th because of those losses, but I think you might ask a lot of people that are going to say bottom half defense. I think 12th is like the worst case scenario for this defense. I would expect those edge guys, either Tim Williams or Tyus Bowser, to become at least a starting caliber number 2 pass rusher. I think Matt Judon takes a step up. I think they figure out what to do without CJ Mosley there. The D-line's going to be great, and then this secondary is awesome. So, they're going to be on the field a lot because I think this offense stinks, which is going to hurt them. And you do have some question marks, but at the end of the day, it's the Baltimore Ravens. They're going to ball out on defense no matter who's on the field. So I hope I, appeased some Ravens fans there who are going to be pissed at me. But let's wrap up and take a look at the schedule now. It's actually a pretty favorable schedule, despite this being a team that finished first place last year. So Vegas has them with an 8-win total. I am going to go under, no surprise there. But I've got them going 6-10, which is much higher than what the next 4 or 5 teams are going to be. I think it's actually a pretty favorable schedule. They start at Miami, a pretty winnable game. They got Arizona at home. I don't think that team will be really ready to be good yet with Patrick Peterson on that suspension. Kyler Murray just in his 2nd game on the road against this defense. Then you got to go to Kansas City. You get Cleveland at home and at Pittsburgh. Not an easy stretch. Could honestly probably have a question mark next to that game against Cleveland. Then Cincinnati at home. And then it gets a little harder as you move on. At Seattle, never easy. New England, at Cincinnati, Houston, at the Rams, San Francisco. Really tough stretch there. I think that's where we might see this season kind of fall apart. Do we get some questions about is Lamar Jackson going to get replaced in the offseason? Do they go to RG3? Hell, even Trace McSorley? I think we get some of those conversations. And then they have Buffalo and New York to maybe silence a little bit of that. And then they finish with Cleveland and Pittsburgh. So I've got them winning 6 games, which is a lot for the 28th team. But honestly, with how low of a ceiling I see this offense with Lamar Jackson, barring any kind of miraculous increase from the accuracy gods here for Lamar Jackson, I just have a really hard time seeing this team meeting their 8-win over-under. This is already an optimistic outlook here. and even beyond that, making the playoffs in a division that's going to be much improved this year, with Pittsburgh getting their heads on their shoulders, the Bengals getting healthy, and the Browns being the hype team that they are this year. So I apologize to the Ravens fans. This has been a team that I do like to cheer for. I love this culture. I think they do things the right way there in Baltimore. I just don't know if it's in the cards this season. If they end up with a high pick and then maybe they bring in a Tua and continue their Alabama legacy in Baltimore, or maybe Jake Fromm, Jacob Eason emerges, something like that, maybe that changes the scope moving forward and they can kind of re-engage this culture to be more of a deadly playoff team in the future. I just think this is going to be an off year and a bit of a transition year for the Ravens, which was already started by all of their losses in the offseason. So that's going to do it. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I'm really excited to see what you guys think in the comments. This was kind of my first controversial ranking. That held up pretty well last year when we revealed the Jags at 23. We'll see how it pans out this year. Please do hit that like button, guys. Cheers as always, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.